Stevie, welcome back. You're guessing more Hearthstone cards today because last time it went so well for you, so we figured we'd give you a second chance.
Pasta fazool, I am a fool.
Okay. What? Okay, anyways, just like last time, a lot of these are super spicy, and I try to go more into just a vacuum, like a card in a vacuum, so you don't have to think about synergies whatsoever. Because like a card like Nozari from last time, people got mad at me because they're like, oh, like, how was he supposed to know how good that is? And, you know, you did the same to me, so I don't really care, but I'll do it for you this time.
Hell yeah.
So I'm going to send you the first card.
Let's get that bread.
For Outcast, it is when the card is on the left or rightmost side of your hand. That's when Outcast triggers.
Shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 4 cards. Outcast, your opponent does the same. This is actually like really cool. This reminds me a lot of card destruction. If you've played Pokemon TCG, this kind of reminds you of like any one of the professors where you kind of just refresh your hand theoretically. The question is during like a mid-range turn, I guess just like turn like 4 beyond, do you want to be spending 4 mana to just sort of like refresh your hand? Because that's like a lot. Kind of reminds me of like 7 mana sprint for a rogue, where you're kind of drawing 4 cards to just refresh your hand. And even if you prepped it out, it wasn't like amazing. It was like pretty good, but like it never like won you the game. I don't think this card is good. I think that 4 mana to refresh your hand is just a little too much, and you'd have to have completely emptied your hand on like turn 4, 5, 6, 7. Obviously, if you draw this like off the top during like a late game scenario, like congratulations, you're like the greatest gamer ever conceived. And I think like the Outcast is just way too matchup specific, where like in certain matchups is like an auto win, but again, like if you're against like anything aggro at all that's just managed to dump its hand before you, you're basically just giving them a free refresh. So I'm gonna call this pretty bad.
Yeah, you'd be pretty accurate actually.
Let's go.
This card, yeah, dude, let's go. A lot of people thought that this card was going to be very good when it was first released, but like you said, like, it's just too slow in like a tempo deck, and generally speaking, it is very matchup dependent. But it ended up being actually really good in the following year when they released the questlines in Stormwind, because there was a whole questline for Demon Hunter drawing as many cards in a turn to like go forward in your questline. And I'll show you what a questline is later in this, because there is one in here. But it ended up actually seeing a lot of play then because of that synergy with the questline. But in a vacuum on its own, it just was not super great. I think overall this card would be considered pretty bad.
Neat.
Okay. All right, nice. All right, what about this card?
Oh my god, so many Demon Hunter cards.
I only give you 2, so this is your last one.
All right.
But I figured I would showcase some of the spicier ones.
Kurtrus Ashfall in Battlecry. Attack the left and rightmost enemy minions. Outcast immune this turn. Quick question. When this attacks, like let's say it swings into something with like 5 damage, like a Magma Rager, will Kurtrus still attack the rightmost, or does it just like stop right there?
I am pretty sure he dies, but I'm gonna be honest, I cannot remember.
Alright, so again, Demon Hunter, very aggressive deck. Is playing a 4 mana 3/4 good? That, sure, it has charge in very large quotations. Okay, now I'm like thinking of like a second scenario where like if your opponent only has 1 minion, does Kurtrus just attack it twice?
I believe it does attack it twice. Again, it's been a while since I played Demon Hunter, so but I believe because the notion is the minion would be the left and the rightmost minion, so it would attack both. It would attack the same minion twice, sorry.
So literally this just kind of stands out to me as like a 4 mana 6/4 at the absolute best, with like charge and immune. I guess like rush and immune or whatever. I think that's pretty bad. I genuinely don't think this is good in any capacity. This just looks so slow. It looks so understated. There are just like so many better options in my mind that should exist, that you should never have to resort to playing a 4 mana 3/4. So I'm gonna call this card terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I think the logic behind this card was that you play an aggro deck, you have a board, your opponent plays 2 minions, you play Kurtrus on the Outcast, and then it kills that minion while you can push face with your other minions, right? But most of the time, like you said, this just isn't good enough. A Demon Hunter could just be doing probably something better. And I was trying not to answer these questions in such a way where I would kind of foreshadow how bad this card actually was. But yeah, like the reason why I don't know a lot of these interactions is because the card was like almost unplayable. It was pretty bad. What about this card? So this is a hero card. I think you remember what a hero card is.
Yeah.
So when you play this, this actually transforms your hero into this, and then he also gets this hero power.
All right, let's take a look-see. Wild Heart Guff. Battlecry, set your maximum mana to 20. Gain a mana crystal. Draw a card. Oh my god! Like I'm just reading this, and I'm just like, this has to be a custom card. Nurture hero power. Choose one. Draw a card. Not like a gain an empty mana crystal. Just straight up gain a mana crystal.
So theoretically, if you gain a mana crystal, your hero power costs 1.
We did it. We power crept Wild Growth. I didn't know if it was possible.
Wild Growth is Wild Growth is it got nerfed a while ago. It used to be 2 mana, now it's 3, and then after that it kind of died.
To be fair, nothing dealt more psychic damage to me than like a druid going like turn 1, like coin Wild Growth into like innervate Wild Growth. Like I would die on the spot. I am a corpse.
Yep.
So so 5 mana. This is like, so the only concern that I have for this is just a metagame being too fast for you to sort of play a quote unquote, in very large quotations, like a 5 mana do nothing. This seems like really good in like like druid, because druid just late game is basically late game the class. And with 20 mana, you're just able to pump out either like a bunch of mid-range plays or like 2 super large plays that are just super designed to. You're only like in Hearthstone, you're sort of designed to be only able to do either like only a couple mid-range plays or like 1 super large high investment mana play, like a 9 or 10 cost card. But if you're at like 20 mana or even like 15, it's probably decent. I'd say like it's good, but I wouldn't call it like I'd say like if a metagame is slow enough, this card is probably really good. Otherwise, this card's probably unplayable.
Okay, this card is probably the strongest card that Druid has ever received. This is a...
Oh no.
So you're right, like, against a super aggressive deck, Guff is kind of just not good enough. But, like, I mean, ever since this card was released, Druid has been this class that just feels like it's absolute nonsense. And it is absolutely baffling to me they haven't nerfed this card yet. So, yeah. A pretty good card. Let's move on to the next one. What about this one?
Nozari. Battlecry, restore both heroes to full health. Oh my god. We really are descending into like basically custom card territory. Holy. This does look like a paladin card. Jesus Christ. It's 10 mana, like heal good. There's no way this is good. The only scenario where I could think this is like in any universe playable is if there's like a priest paladin, like Auchenai soul priest type card, where like you play it and then you just Nozari so that you're basically gonna drag them down to hell with you. I'm pretty sure like a 10 mana 4/12 tutored out is like actually the worst thing you could be doing in Hearthstone in all of human history. So this card has to be terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Oh my god, God bless.
Yeah, see, I put this card in to see what your thought process would be. Like I think like at 10 mana, I don't know why they made this card 10 mana, to be honest with you, because the stat line doesn't. If it had taunt, maybe it'd be worth it. But yeah, like you said, like the issue is that you play this card generally, but if your opponent has minions on board, it's just like you played a 4/12. Unfortunately for Paladin, yeah, it's pretty bad. It's unfortunate. It is what it is, though.
Unlucky.
Right.
This really is the most Paladin card of all time. Archivist Elysiana? Elysiana. Battlecry, discover 5 cards. Replace your deck with 2 copies of each. Oh, okay. Do the 5 cards, are they just like completely random, or is it just like neutral cards and your class card?
The second one. So okay. I think I will say this for when it was in the game, I believe until, yeah, I think it was the whole time it was in standard. I could be, no, maybe, okay, I don't remember the exact change when they did this, but with Discover, for a very long time, it used to be that your class cards had a higher chance to be in the Discover pool, and neutral cards would have a lower % chance. They have recently changed it. I think she was still in the standard set when they changed this, that all neutral and class cards have the same chance of getting into the pool.
So the first thing that pops into my mind for any reason why you would ever want to play an 8 mana 7/7 do nothing is Warrior, because Omega Low Warrior players, you either sit in a game of Hearthstone for 2 hours, or you sit in a game of Hearthstone for 2 minutes playing the world's most frustrating aggro deck. So you'd probably play this in Control. You could like maybe loop this with like self-bouncing or duplication, where like once you've basically run your deck dry, you could play Archivist, you could get just enough good stuff cards, and again just like fatigue your opponent out, or basically yeah, you just like fatigue your opponent out. I guess this just sort of boils down to, was Control Warrior good? Probably at some point, because this is Hearthstone and Control Warrior always makes you want to rip my hair out. So this card was probably played in it. So that's my final answer. It's probably pretty good just because Warrior.
It was probably pretty good because of Warrior. Yeah. That's the final answer. Okay, so this card actually is very interesting. So you're right, it was played in Control Warrior, and it led to games that were like 50 minutes long, something around there, some crazy amount. Because at 8 mana, there was another card that which would allow you to shuffle this card back into your deck in the same turn at 10 mana, right? So you'd play this, get 10 cards, shuffle this card back into your deck, which means you have 10 more cards waiting to go when you run out of those other 10 cards. So it was pretty ridiculous. There were games, mirror matches that would last longer than like 40 minutes, which is ridiculous for a Hearthstone game. And I think during that time, that's when like the class cards would show up more in Discover pools, and Warrior had very powerful cards at the time. So like your average 5 cards were very good in card quality. So this card was just ridiculous in Warrior. I don't think it saw play in any other deck, because at the time, like if you're playing Control, you had to play Warrior.
It's Warrior.
Yeah, it's all Warriors. Yeah, you're pretty accurate there, I'm gonna be honest. Anyways, speaking of Warrior, what about this card?
Reckless Mummy, Rush Reborn.
So Reborn is the minion is resummoned with 1 health, which means the copy that is summoned also has Rush.
This kind of reminds you of like Kurtrus, except like somehow worse. Well, I guess you get to at least choose the target, and this is a fireball in the sense where it's a 4 mana deal 6 damage to a minion. Oh my god, my analogies are like terrible. This is probably, this just reeks of like, this is an arena card. Like, I can't imagine a scenario where this card is good. This just looks so bad. 4 mana. Yeah, I'm just gonna stick with my gut. This is probably just arena pack filler, like garbage.
Bro, this card was so good.
What?
It was so good, dude. It was one of the reasons why that Control Warrior deck was good. So I think you're thinking of it a little bit wrong here. At worst, this card would often just trade 1 for 1, which sometimes was just good enough, right? Like it's like almost like a removal spell, right?
Okay.
But other times this card would trade 2 for 1. And sometimes you just put this on the board because it just is a decent amount of stats just for what it is. Like, it was such a versatile card, and because for 4 mana you can deal 6 damage and you can pick the targets like you said, it was actually really good.
It has good stats at 4 mana. My brother in Christ, this is a Bloodfin Raptor for 4 mana. Do not gaslight me.
No. It's not even gaslighting. It's just like, for what it is, like you almost have to look at it as like 4 mana, deal 3 damage to 2 different targets, right? But you get to pick. That's not bad whatsoever in a deck that just wants to remove a bunch of minions, right? I'm not saying it was the best card in the entire deck, absolutely not, but it was playable and it was played in every slower Control Warrior deck. Like, it was very good.
Damn. All right.
What about this one?
Octosari. Oh my god. This is like Magic the Gathering art. Death Rattle, draw 8 cards. Damn, 8 mana, 8/8, draw 8. I kind of fuck with that flavor. Again, this just kind of looks like an 8 mana do nothing. Unless there's like a really cheesy way to like trigger its Death Rattle, or a way to like put its Death Rattle onto something else. There's just like no way a card this slow is playable. Like, hypothetically, you could maybe play this in like the world's worst control deck, and you could just like quote unquote like out resource your opponent and just like, you know, just draw 8 cards. Like, it's crazy. 8 cards, crazy. I just don't see this being played at all. Like, this just looks way too slow, does nothing, and unless like you literally build your entire deck around like drawing 8 cards on like turn 4 or 5, like, and even then, like, sprint on 5 isn't even that good. So this card's probably not that good.
So This card's absolutely bro. I'm kidding.
Oh my god.
Yeah. No, I think so. At the time when this card was released, so this was released in Savers of Uldum, most classes, I would say, didn't have a pretty great draw engine, right? Like they were very selective on what cards actually got to draw cards. Sorry, what classes got to draw cards.
Shout out to Paladin.
Yeah, so this card was often tried at like the top end of like a mid-range deck to play it, and then if your opponent answers it, it's like, oh, I have a bunch more resources that you have to deal with, right? Now, the problem with that is that generally you didn't really need those cards, and there was often like I would rather just play a good card than just a card that draws me 8 more cards. It's also slow card draw, which isn't great. You would probably see this card most often when it was evolved into or transformed into, and then you would be upset because it's like, oh, I'm gonna burn my hand or burn a bunch of cards in my hand. But yeah, it did not see like any play. What about this one?
Colossus of the Moon, Divine Shield and Reborn. So this comes back as a 10-1 with Divine Shield, right?
Yes.
Damn, this card is either really, really good or like the worst thing I've ever seen. So first thought that comes to mind is your opponent tries to remove it. They burn a bunch of removal and bodies trying to get rid of it, and then they realized, oh shoot, it came back, and I don't have a way to pop the Divine Shield. And my gut's just kind of telling me it's a 10 mana 10/10 that does nothing. I just can't imagine a scenario where you could justify, oh my god, Wildheart Guff? Wait a minute. Outside of like the most slow, useless metagame where it's just playing this card is justified, there's just like no way this is playable. There's no way War Golem with Divine Shield and Reborn is good, so it's bad.
Okay, so this is like a little bit of an interesting one. I wouldn't say this card is like unplayable. I think you're like making the case that you just would never play this card. You could play this card. It was very good in decks that were able to cheat out big minions. So there was decks like Big Paladin, which could summon this from your deck pretty early on for 5 mana. There was like Big Shaman, which would also play this card, because if you got to get this card on board and your opponent just couldn't deal with it, you just won the game. Like the game's over. Like how do you beat this? Again, I wouldn't call it like awful. Like it wasn't unplayable. I don't know if you were really reaching for unplayable there, but it did see some play in some decks.
Yeah, I was definitely leaning towards that.
All right, what about this card?
Theotar the Mad Duke, Battle Cry, discover a card in each player's hand and swap them. Bro, what is this artwork? What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah, it's a spicy one. It's definitely a very dramatic.
So first thing that comes to mind, okay, so there's a card in Yu-Gi-Oh called Exchange, and it is literally just this card where both players will show each other their hands, and you basically swap cards. This kind of seems like that on steroids, and I find that to be really, really scary. Theoretically, you could just take a card out of your opponent's, like you could just take like the game-winning combo piece out of your opponent's hand. You could take like an extremely good card out of it, and then you just like give them like a coin or like some complete garbage that you have just like rotting in your hand, or something that doesn't have synergy with their deck. On the other hand, it could just be a 4-mana 3/3 do nothing. So I'm gonna probably put on like really good, at least initially, what people thought, into sort of like okay.
Okay, so this card was actually released in the most recent set in Hearthstone. So this card's only been out for less than an expansion. Oh. And I can tell you right now that this card's probably tier S.
Holy
and
shit.
The reason for this is because there is a lot of really powerful cards in the game right now. So if I play this and I steal your win condition, you just outright lose. Like that's how powerful this card can be, right? Like you said at the start. And it took people a little bit to actually get this card into their deck because people were trying to build decks with just to see what things were strong. But I'm gonna toot my own horn here. I called this card as the most powerful card of the set because Hearthstone's never had disruption like this before. Like this is just straight up, sometimes you're gonna play this and win the game. And that is absolutely ridiculous. And sometimes your opponent will have it back and they'll just steal the card that you took. But often, like if you just steal, even if you don't get their best card in their hand, but you just steal something very strong. Like let's say I play this on turn 4 and I get Wildheart Guff, right? How much weaker is your deck now, right? Like your deck just got exponentially weaker and my deck's about to pop the hell off. So, and I developed a 3/3, which, I mean, it's not great, but it is pretty good. But at the moment, this card is very, very good. Like very good.
Damn.
What about this card?
Troll Centurion. Rush, honorable kill. Deal 8 damage to the enemy hero. What is honorable kill?
So honorable, oh yeah, sorry, I keep forgetting about keywords.
You're good.
Honorable kill is you have to deal the exact amount of damage to your opponent, or to the minion that you're killing. I guess it works on heroes too, so I guess your opponent. So for instance, if this does 8 damage exactly, it gets the deal 8 damage to the enemy hero.
This looks like an arena pack filler card. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. It's common, it's got wonky stats, and it has like a really kind of funny effect. Yeah, what would you even put this in? That's like the #1 thing that like leaps out to me. It's not a finisher because, actually, yo, wait a minute, is it a finisher? Okay, now I've got to like tap into my mind's eye of like every single legendary I remember. I guess I've just gotta, like theoretically, this is a really great removal card in the sense of where like a lot of like late game legendaries, think of like Ragnaros, or exactly Ragnaros is the only card that comes to mind, but there's probably like more of cards that kind of legendaries that kind of just have like 8 health and are kind of like a nuisance to remove. So I guess like theoretically, decks could play like a Troll Centurion as just like an out that also just happens to deal 8 face. But I'm pretty sure decks would rather use that slot for like literally anything else. So I'm just gonna call this card bad. Like, there's no way this card is playable. There's no way. Surely. Okay, go for this.
Yeah. I put it in just to see what your thoughts would be, but yeah, you're right. Like I think an 8-mana 8/8 with Rush isn't horrible, so but it's definitely good in arena, like you said. But yeah, the honorable kill mechanic is something that's very interesting. It has to be a very, very good reason for you to run honorable kill, and how many minions in the game actually have like 8 health is very low. So if they don't have an 8 health minion, it's like, what are you doing with this? Like, it's absolutely like whatever. So yeah, I think your analysis is pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a quest line here, okay? So this is 4 different cards that we're gonna have to go through. Well, I guess you're gonna go through. I already know the card. So just to make sure that we're clear, a quest line starts with the demon seed.
Okay.
Then you do the first part of the quest line. So the first part of the quest line is taking damage on your turns, and then you get the reward, and then you move on to the next one, which is establish the link. And then you move on to complete the ritual, and then your final reward is this card.
So let's get reading, my least favorite thing. Questline, take 8 damage on your turns. Reward, lifesteal, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. Questline, repeat. Reward, Blightborn Tamsin. Rest of the game, damage you take on your turn damages your opponent instead. So the first thing that comes to mind is that this seems, in Warlock especially, this seems relatively easy to complete. Like, Warlock obviously is basically just the deck that damages itself and gets a bunch of resources. Stuff like just straight up tapping for, I guess, just like for 12 turns in a row is just straight up enough to complete this quest. But I don't know, I'm just like looking at Tamsin, it's like, is this good? This effect of Tamsin is just kind of useless. So I think this card is this quest line, sorry, is probably pretty bad. I don't think it's that good.
Okay, I'm gonna say this one thing, and then you can reevaluate what you're saying. So when you run out of cards in Hearthstone, you start taking incremental damage in fatigue, right? So the first time you draw and you don't have a card in your deck, you take 1, and then it increments by 1 every single time you draw a card. That damage, which is done to your hero, as long as it's done to you on your turn, goes to your opponent.
So like I was saying, yeah, I think this is one of the best quest lines of all time. I think that you just straight up yes, today I will deck myself out. Oh my god. This is, so people just play this as fatigue.
Yeah, so this card was released in United and Stormwind, and I don't know if you've heard the rumors about United and Stormwind, but it was arguably the fastest metagame we've ever seen, like in terms of just how fast you would die. And this quest line was so good that you could probably, in combination with other cards that Warlock had, you could get this relatively done on turn 5 or turn 6 pretty consistently because of another card. And you would play this and your opponent would be dead the following. This card might see play again because we're going into the point after the next expansion where it is a 6 expansion standard metagame, where there might be enough cards to actually support this again, which is again very spooky. But at the moment it does not see play. But before it was nerfed, this card was absolutely ridiculous. Damn. And it's banned in Wild. So a card banned in Wild. Also, Stealer Souls is also banned in Wild because of the interaction with this. So You could like I don't know how that really, because we're basing this purely off standard, but like if that tells you how powerful this effect can be in Hearthstone, like that's a really good way of saying it.
All I'm gonna say is that if there's ever a card that revolves around fatigue, it's probably broken. Like just by default, you don't even need to read it. You're just like, yeah, this is probably gonna be broken.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna show you the very last card, and then we'll be done. Okay.
All right. Cornelius Rome, 6 mana, 4/5. Oh my god, Yeti stats. My brain just defaults to like a Chillwind Yeti. Whenever I see 4 or 5, I'm just like, this is my favorite 4-drop. At the start and end of each player's turn, draw a card. Okay, you be drawing cards. This is so like I would end my turn, I draw a card, I pass to my opponent, and like Cornelius would trigger, I draw a card, and they pass, and I would draw an additional card, right?
Yeah. So when this card is played, you get a card at the end of your turn, a card at your opponent's start of the turn, a card at the end of your opponent's turn. You draw another card from this at the start of your turn, but you also draw the additional card that you would draw naturally. So you draw 5 cards, and this card lives a full turn.
Damn! All right, Octosari could get it. All right, so 6 mana 4/5 is pretty. Those are pretty slow stats, but I mean, like Theotar is like apparently the greatest card of the game, so screw me, am I right? So the first thought that comes to mind is that your opponent kind of looks at this card and is like, I either have to remove this immediately, otherwise my opponent just out-resources me and I lose the game, or I just kind of leave this on the board and hope that like my opponent's draws aren't good enough. And realistically, they aren't going to be able to play every single card that they draw because 10 mana, nice resource system, should have been YuGiOh. But I think this is probably pretty good, just because it sort of forces a response in the same sense like a lot of cards kind of don't. Where it's sort of got, like, you kind of have to remove this body, otherwise you just immediately get out resource and like you will lose over the course of like 2, 3, 4 turns, and like just you get so much advantage if you just leave it alive. So I call this card pretty good. I'd put this like a 7 out of 10. I think this card is really neat. It's pretty slow, but I think that shouldn't matter hypothetically. Yeah, I like this card. I like this card. Thumbs up. I like drawing cards.
This card was released in the same set as the Demon Seed, and a lot of people thought this card was going to be like broken because this is very like that's a lot of cards. And again, I was talking about how some of the classes don't have great draw engines, so you put this in, you draw, even if you draw 2 cards from this, like that's pretty decent. It warrants a response.
Yeah.
But it turned out that this actually is not very good. It's too slow in an aggro deck because at that point you're just losing too much tempo. If you're not winning the game by turn 6, arguably it's already over, depending on what the deck is. You don't want this in a mid-range deck because you want to start playing more, or you want to get more tempo-oriented minions on the board. And in a slower control deck, like why am I running this, right? Like I'd rather just run removal or stuff that actually wins me the game. So this card just doesn't really have a deck. But I think like your exact reasoning was a lot of people thought with like when this card was going to be released, like how good it was going to be, right? Very powerful effect, neutral draw. Every class is running this. Why would I not run this? And like the benefit of running this into an aggressive deck is even if I drew 5 cards, like all my minions and all my like spells theoretically should be less than like 3-4 mana, right? So I'm still playing a bunch of cards even though I'm drawing a bunch. So it should be like the best card in the game, right?
Yeah.
No.
Oh my god.
Can't wait to see if they nerf it or not, because apparently they're going to do balance changes next week or something. So
we were doing so well at the start, and then as soon as we hit Restless Mommy, everything went downhill.
No, you got Octosari too, so you're chilling.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like Hearthstone's interesting because of the fact that you can't interact on your opponent's turn, right? So I think you really undervalued how good a card like Theotar actually is. Like that just alone makes that card very, very good. But you did good. I think you did fine.
Neat.